Hello again, and welcome to another exciting episode of Social Studies. I know it seems like it's been a while since we had a new episode, so hopefully you will enjoy this one. We're into a new Unit 4 this is, and it's all about the government and the Constitution. And we are going to start out specifically talking about the first government and Constitution of the brand new country called excuse me, I'm sorry. The United States of America. I think I might be allergic to these videos because I feel like I sneeze every time I start to make one now. Sorry, I can edit that later and take that out. What was I Oh, okay. So here's what we need to know. This is the note sheet that we are looking at. So pause, look to your folder, pull out this sheet. Actually, now pause after I've given you the directions. Okay, hopefully you're back. You have this sheet in front of you because this is going to be a nice, quick, easy one for you. But we're going to be filling in this note sheet right here, just the front of it. The questions will be straight from it. If you listen to this video, you will get the questions right. You will get a perfect score. So, first of all, after independence, our constitutions and government. You know that our nation's birthday is July 4th, 1776. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, that is the day the Declaration of Independence was approved. Do you need to know that date? Yes, you do. Should you know the difference between 1776 and 1876 or 1976? Yes, you should. 1776. Memorize it. All right, July 4th, 1776, we declare independence. The 13 colonies become the 13 independent states. Now, at that time, states meant country. This is all part of the American Revolution, which does not just include the war, but the whole drastic change that took place beginning right back after the French and Indian War, with all the events that led to the Revolutionary War, the war itself, which was these two we covered last unit. But another important part is this creation of a new government and new ideas about freedom and equality that came with our revolution. When does this end? Well, it's hard to say. We'll talk about that in class someday. We're not going to try to put a pinpoint figure on it. That date you don't need to know. So this is the thing you do need to know. We declare independence on July 4th, 1776. And George Washington becomes president on April 30th, 1789. You don't need to know that date. You need to know George Washington is the first president. You should definitely know George Washington is the first president. I will repeat, George Washington was the first president. So if I ask you on a little quiz, who was the first president? The answer is George Washington. All right, so lots of Americans tend to think, and lots of people around the world probably tend to think, the whole revolution was we were fighting a war, we declared independence, and the next day, boom, George Washington is president, and the United States is the greatest country on earth. Okay, it doesn't quite happen that quickly. For one thing, you can see from looking at this screen right now, hopefully you're looking closely, over here, we declare independence here. George Washington doesn't become president until here. This is almost just short of 13 years. What goes on in this 13 years? Well, we have a different national government. We have a national government that is set up and organized by a different constitution, a constitution that was called the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. Although we're just going to go with the name Articles of Confederation, even though Perpetual Union is a great part of the name as well, because perpetual means like forever, never ending, perpetual. No caller ID. I think I'm going to pass on that one. All right. The Articles of Confederation. Oh, and union. We keep talking about this word union or united or unanimous or uno. Unus, Latin, one. So we are united forever, basically, that's saying. Okay, so over here, just looking quickly, take the time. This is a nice, pretty thing to have on your sheet, but there's a reason for it. Take the time to read it. So you see, we declare independence here, 1776, 1777. The Continental Congress adopts the first Constitution, which is called the Articles of Confederation. And if you read on, it creates a very weak national government. So national government, that means the government for all of the 13 states, not just one, not just two, but all 13. Kind of like our national government today makes laws for all 50 states. Sometimes another word for the national government is the federal government. Those are going to be used interchangeably. National and federal. Federal, national, same thing for all our purposes in 7th grade. All right, then you can see the war goes on here. British surrender in 1781. Treaty of Paris officially ends the war 1783. 1787 is something called Shays Rebellion. We'll talk about that another time. Down here, 1788, the Constitution, the new Constitution, is ratified. Elections are held, and the new national government begins to work in 1789. And 1789 is when George Washington is sworn in as president. And for watching this video, here's some bonus information that might come in handy for you. Also in 1789 is the establishment of the village of Canandaigua. Canandaigua, it becomes the first American, white, whatever you want to call them, European settlers. You know that, remember that in the last unit, John Sullivan came and burnt the Seneca town called Canandaigua. Well, now it's being settled by Americans in 1789, Canandaigua. All right, so we can skip over this. This is just, we'll talk about this in class a little bit, or we did. Just giving you an idea that the 13 United States were independent states at a time when state meant country. So these 13 states were kind of like Europe in a way, under the European Union, where they have a loose confederation. They have a government for all of Europe called the European Union. However, a lot of the real power lies within these countries or these states. And the difference here is that nowadays in the United States, most Americans are more loyal to the United States as opposed to New York or Pennsylvania or Virginia or whatever. Here in Europe, they've had a few more 100 years of being independent states, so their states, most people are still loyal to Spain or Italy or France as opposed to the entire European Union, which means that these people don't want to give up too much power to the European Union, which means that the national government of Europe is kind of weak, which means that most of the individual states have more power. So there's the European Union. You can see them struggling to get along. We'll talk about this later. Brings us to here. So pick up your pencil or pen and be ready to write. Here we go. How the USA was governed before George Washington became our first president. So for about 13 years, from 1776 to, well, it's not on here, but 1789, for about 13 years passed from when the United States was born until Washington became our first president and the U.S. really became the country that we know today. After declaring independence on, you should know this date. I'm not going to tell you. No, I will tell you because I don't want you to say you didn't know. On July 4th, 1776, the 13 colonies became the 13 states. And at that time, state basically meant country. Okay, so you have this part filled in by now. If not, you can pause. And then when you resume, you will hear me say, each state wrote its own constitution. 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 Which we'll talk about later what a constitution is. But it's a document that sets up the government. And they set up their own, so they wrote their own constitution and set up its own state government. Every state set up its own state government. The Articles of Confederation, right here is the spelling for it. Follow the red line up here. Articles of Confederation, that's how you spell it, was the Constitution for the United States of America for all 13 states. And basically, we'll talk a little bit more about what was in those Articles of Confederation, but what type of national government we had. We didn't have a president or a Supreme Court or anything like that. Basically, we were governed by a national legislature. Legislature, I've heard that word before. What does it mean? Legislature. It is, i.e., in other words, a group that makes laws. A group that makes laws, that's what you fill in here. Yep, group that makes laws. Moving on to the bottom half of the page. Now we just filled in this part. The United States was governed by a national legislature, i.e. a group that makes laws. The group that makes laws was it was called the Continental Congress. Officially, it later became the Confederation Congress. We're not going to worry about it. We'll call it the Continental Congress or just the Congress. That's what we're talking about, the national legislature. There was no president or executive branch, if you want to put that, or national courts. No national courts, no president. We'll come back to that in 1 second. 16 different men served as president of the Congress, but they had no real power. So just moving on here. This is, I should have put this order earlier. This is an example of a state government or state constitution. This one was written by John Adams. It is the Constitution for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, written by John Adams, and it is still in use today. The oldest continuously used constitution in the world, at least written constitution, Massachusetts, John Adams. The New York State Constitution is complicated. We'll talk about it in school, but we're just going to say it's complicated. We're not going to go into too much details right now. The Articles of Confederation, we are going to go into a little bit more, even though this is taking longer than I want. So basically, this is just a quotation from it. We're not going to read the whole thing. But it said that the states hereby severally enter into this is the key word, words, a firm league of friendship with each other. So they're all agreeing to be friends. Not necessarily a real country as much as they're going to be allies, an alliance, a confederation. Confederation, just like the Iroquois Confederation or Iroquois Confederacy, where each of the tribes of the Iroquois had their own government, but then they were joined in an alliance with one another or a league of friendship. Similar thing. For their common defense, for security of their liberties, mutual and general welfare, binding themselves to assist each other against all forces offered to attacks upon them, etc., etc., etc. So they basically are agreeing to an alliance friendship. Some other things that are in there, we're not going to go through the whole thing. It creates the name, the United States of America. That's what it's going to be called. We keep that name. Spoiler alert there. In this national legislature, just like it was when they were declaring independence, each state gets one vote. Regardless of how big their population is or how small it is, each state gets one vote. They also, another interesting little trivial thing is that Canada was pre-approved. So it has the 13 states, and it says if Canada wants to join, they're in. They don't need any permission other than just joining us. Any other states that want to join have to get approval from 9 of the 13 states in order to join. But Canada was pre-approved. Canada did not join. Another spoiler alert there. All right. Basically, what was in this Constitution, or what was not in the Constitution, I should say, there was no president, no executive branch, no federal or national court system, so no Supreme Court, no court system. And they did not have the power to collect taxes. They could only request money from the states, who could offer the money or could not. And there were no consequences if they did not do that. So most states did not actually pay money to the federal government. Here's a list of the people who served as president of the Congress, not the same as the president of the United States. Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, let's see, when would it be? 1770. Well, and one of these people was president of the United States. These people were not president of the United States. They were president of the Congress. Like in July 4th, 1776, when they declared independence, John Hancock was the president of the Congress. One person I want to point out to you down here, number 14, Nathaniel Gorham of Massachusetts was president of the Congress for a little bit. He will later, with his friend Oliver Phelps, they will buy all of the land in upstate New York, basically including Canandaigua, which will be settled by his son, also named Nathaniel Gorham, and Gorham Street is named for them. All right, just back here to make sure I filled in all the notes, and then I will let you go. Let's see. After the war ended, those 16 different. Oh, after the war ended, Congress had very little power. It could not collect taxes. It could only ask states for money, which they usually did not pay. Many people preferred to serve in their own state legislatures, the groups that made laws for the states, because those were where the real power was. There was more power in that than there was in the national or federal government. And very often, once the war ends, Congress could not even hold sessions because not enough delegates bothered to show up. So our national government was very weak, in other words, under the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution. Okay, and that is all for now. Sorry it took a little longer than I would have liked.